The ink-stained cowboy sat alone at the saloon table in Silver Creek, Montana Territory, writing his 50-second letter to a woman who had never written him back, and he had no idea that in 3 days she would walk through his door and change everything. Cole Brennan had rough hands from years of working cattle ranches across the Montana Territory, but when he held a pen, something shifted inside him. The year was 1883, and the wild frontier was slowly being tamed by railroads and telegraph lines, but out here in Silver Creek, life still moved at the pace of a horse's gallop. He had met Eliza Montgomery exactly 1 year ago when she passed through town with her aunt, stopping at the general store where Cole happened to be picking up supplies. Their conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes, but something in her green eyes and the way she smiled when he fumbled over his words made him feel like he had been struck by lightning. She mentioned she was from Boston, that she was heading back after visiting family in Helena, and Cole knew right then that he could not let her disappear from his life without trying. So he asked if he could write to her. She seemed surprised, maybe even amused, but she wrote down her address on a scrap of paper and handed it to him with a slight blush on her cheeks. That was all the encouragement Cole needed. The first letter was awkward. He told her about the ranch where he worked, about the mountains that surrounded Silver Creek, about how the snow fell so thick in winter you could barely see 5 feet ahead. He mailed it off and waited. No response came, but Cole was nothing if not persistent. The second week, he wrote about a wild Mustang he helped break, about how the animal reminded him of the untamed spirit he saw in her eyes during their brief meeting. Still nothing. By the 4th week, he wondered if she even received his letters, but something stubborn in him refused to quit. Cole wrote about everything. He wrote about the men he worked with, rough characters with hearts of gold buried beneath layers of prairie dust. He wrote about the changing seasons, the way autumn painted the mountainsides in gold and crimson. He wrote about his dreams of owning his own spread someday, of building something that would last. He wrote about books he borrowed from the schoolteacher, Miss Hartley, who took pity on him and lent him volumes of poetry and adventure stories. He even copied out verses that made him think of Eliza, though he felt foolish doing it. The other ranch hands teased him mercilessly. "Still writing to that ghost woman," they would laugh. "Face it, Brennan, she probably threw your letters in the fire the moment they arrived." But Cole kept writing. Every Sunday, without fail, he sat down and poured his heart onto paper. He told her things he had never told another living soul, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about the loneliness that sometimes crept up on him under the vast Montana sky, about the hope he carried that life held something more than just hard work and early graves. By the time spring rolled around again, Cole had written 52 letters. 1 full year of words sent into the void. He should have given up months ago, but each week when he sat down to write, he felt connected to her somehow, even across the 1,000 miles that separated them. Maybe she never read a single word. Maybe she was married by now, or had moved away, or simply thought he was crazy, but the letters had become a ritual, a way of making sense of his own thoughts and feelings. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late April when everything changed. Cole was working on replacing a section of fence that had been damaged during a spring storm when one of the younger hands, Tommy, came riding up fast, kicking up clouds of dirt. "Cole, there is someone at your cabin," Tommy shouted, pulling his horse to a stop. Cole wiped the sweat from his forehead and squinted at the boy. "What do you mean someone is at my cabin?" A woman came in on the morning stage. "She asked around town for you and they told her where you lived. She is waiting there now." Cole's heart started pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. He dropped his tools and practically ran to where his horse was grazing nearby. The ride back to his small cabin on the edge of town felt like it took forever, even though it was barely 2 miles. His mind raced through possibilities. It could not be her. Why would she come all this way without writing first? Maybe it was someone else entirely, maybe someone with bad news about a relative he did not know he had. But when he rounded the bend and saw his cabin, there she was, sitting on the wooden steps of his porch, a traveling bag beside her. Eliza Montgomery, wearing a dark blue traveling dress, her auburn hair pinned up but with a few loose strands framing her face. She looked nervous, her hands clasped together in her lap, and when she heard his horse approach, she stood up quickly, her eyes wide. Cole dismounted before his horse fully stopped, nearly tripping over his own feet. For a moment they just stared at each other, the distance between them feeling both enormous and impossibly small. "Eliza," his voice came out rough, uncertain. "Hello, Cole." Her voice was softer than he remembered, with a slight tremor to it. "I imagine you are surprised to see me." Surprise does not even begin to cover it. He took a few steps closer, then stopped, suddenly aware of how dusty and sweaty he was from working all day. "I have been writing to you for a year and you never once replied. I figured you wanted nothing to do with me." A pained expression crossed her face. "It is more complicated than that. May we talk inside?" Cole nodded and moved past her to open the door. His cabin was small and simple, just one main room with a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a stove, and some shelves with his few belongings. He suddenly felt embarrassed by how sparse it was, how rough and unrefined compared to what she must be used to in Boston. Eliza stepped inside and looked around, and to his surprise, she smiled. "It is exactly how I imagined it from your letters. So you did read them." Cole felt something crack open inside his chest. Every single one. She turned to face him, and he saw tears glistening in her eyes. "I read them so many times I have parts of them memorized. The one about the snowstorm in January, when you helped deliver a calf in the middle of the night and nearly froze your fingers off. The one about watching the sunset from the ridge above town and wishing I could see it too. The one where you copied out those lines from Lord Byron." Cole felt heat rise to his face. "Then why did you not write back? I thought I was making a fool of myself, bothering you week after week." Eliza sat down in one of the chairs, and Cole noticed her hands were shaking. "Because I was engaged to someone else." The words hit him like a physical blow. He leaned against the wall, trying to process what she just said. "His name is Richard Thornton. Our families have known each other for years, and everyone expected us to marry. When I met you last spring, the engagement was already understood, though it had not been formally announced yet. When your first letter arrived, I knew I should not read it, but I did anyway. And then the second one came, and the third, and I kept telling myself I would stop, that I would write you and tell you not to send any more, but I could not bring myself to do it. Because you were engaged." Cole heard the flatness in his own voice. "Because your letters were the best part of my week." Eliza stood up suddenly, her composure cracking. "Because when I read your words, I felt more alive than I had felt in years. Richard is a good man, respectable and wealthy, and he would have given me a comfortable life. But when I tried to imagine spending 50 years having polite, empty conversations with him, attending society parties, managing a household, producing heirs, I felt like I was suffocating." She walked to the window and looked out at the mountains in the distance. "Your letters showed me a different kind of life, one with real passion, real feeling, real connection. You wrote about beauty and hardship and dreams with such honesty. You made me feel like you truly saw me, even though we only spoke for 10 minutes. And I realized I could not marry Richard, no matter how much it disappointed my family, because I would always be wondering about the cowboy in Montana who wrote me poetry and told me about breaking wild horses." Cole moved closer to her, his heart hammering. "What did you do?" "I broke off the engagement 2 months ago. It caused a tremendous scandal. My mother has barely spoken to me since. Richard was humiliated in front of all of Boston society. My aunt, the one I visited in Helena, was the only one who supported my decision. She told me if I was brave enough to refuse a life I did not want, I should be brave enough to pursue the one I did want." Eliza turned to face him, and tears were streaming down her cheeks now. "So I used the money my grandmother left me, bought a train ticket, and came here. And now I am terrified because what if I was wrong? What if the connection I felt through your letters is not real? What if you don't actually want me here? Cole closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs, his hands rough against her soft skin. I have thought about you every single day for a year. I wrote those letters because I felt something in that 10-minute conversation that I have never felt before or since. Seeing you sitting on my porch just now, it felt like every good thing I ever hoped for was suddenly possible. So you want me to stay? Her voice was barely a whisper. I want you to stay forever if you will have me. Then he kissed her, and it was nothing like the polite, restrained kisses Eliza had experienced with Richard. This kiss was fierce and genuine, full of a year's worth of longing and hope and fear all mixed together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Eliza laughed through her tears. I should probably find a place to stay in town. I don't want to impose, and it would not be proper for me to stay here. Cole smiled. There is a boarding house run by Mrs. Fletcher. She is a widow, very respectable. She will take good care of you. But Eliza, we need to figure out what happens next. You left your entire life behind to come here. I know. She looked up at him, her green eyes clear and certain now, and I don't regret it. But you are right, we need to be practical. I have some money, enough to support myself for a while. I need to find work, build a life here. I cannot just be the woman who chased after a cowboy. I need to be my own person too. The respect Cole felt for her doubled in that moment. The school teacher, Miss Hartley, was just saying last week that she needs help. The town is growing and she has more students than she can handle alone. You are educated from Boston, you would be perfect. I would like that. Eliza smiled, a real, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. I want to be useful. I want to contribute something meaningful. Over the next few weeks, Eliza settled into life in Silver Creek. Mrs. Fletcher took an immediate liking to her and offered her the best room in the boarding house at a reduced rate. Miss Hartley, a practical woman in her 40s who had never married and seemed content with her life of books and children, hired Eliza on the spot. The townspeople were initially suspicious of the Boston lady who had come west to chase after Cole Brennan. But Eliza won them over with her genuine warmth and willingness to work hard. Cole and Eliza spent every spare moment together. He would meet her after school let out, and they would walk along the creek that gave the town its name, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Boston society, about the pressure to be perfect, about always feeling like she was playing a role rather than living her own life. He told her about his dreams of owning land, about wanting to build something that would last, about the fear that he was not good enough for someone like her. You are exactly good enough, she told him firmly one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. You are honest and kind and hardworking. You have more integrity in your little finger than most of the men I knew in Boston had in their entire bodies. I will never be able to give you the kind of life you left behind, Cole said, voicing the worry that kept him up at night. No fancy parties, no servants, no security. Eliza took his hand and interlaced her fingers with his. I don't want that life, I want this one. With you. I want to watch sunsets over mountains instead of buildings. I want real conversations instead of polite small talk. I want to feel like my life matters, like I am building something real. I love you, Cole said, the words coming out before he could stop them. I know it has only been a few weeks since you arrived, but I loved you before that, through the letters. I love your courage and your spirit and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love how you look at the world like it is full of possibilities. I love you too, Eliza said, and then she kissed him as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, but their happiness was not without challenges. In early June, a man arrived on the stage from the east. He was well-dressed, in his early 30s, with dark hair and a carefully trimmed beard. He checked into the hotel and immediately began asking questions about Eliza Montgomery. Cole heard about it from Tommy, who heard it from the hotel clerk, and his stomach dropped. He found Eliza at the schoolhouse helping Miss Hartley clean up after the day's lessons. "There is a man in town asking about you, well-dressed from the east." Eliza's face went pale. "Richard, it has to be Richard. Your former fiancé, he must have tracked me down. Oh, Cole, I am so sorry." I hoped he would let me go, but his pride was probably wounded. He is not used to being refused. Miss Hartley, who had been pretending not to listen, spoke up. "You should face him, dear, get it over with, and take Cole with you. Show him you have moved on." They found Richard Thornton at the hotel restaurant, eating dinner and looking thoroughly out of place among the miners and ranch hands. When he saw Eliza, he stood up quickly, his face cycling through several emotions before settling on controlled anger. "Eliza. I have been searching for you for weeks." "Hello, Richard." Eliza's voice was steady, but Cole could feel her tension. "This is Cole Brennan." Richard barely glanced at Cole before turning back to Eliza. "Your mother is beside herself with worry. You disappeared without a word to anyone except your aunt, who refused to tell us where you had gone. I have been all over the Western Territories looking for you." "I am sorry for the worry I caused my mother," Eliza said carefully, "but I made my position clear before I left. The engagement is over. I have started a new life here." Richard finally looked at Cole, and his expression was pure disdain. "With a cowboy, Eliza, you are throwing away everything for an infatuation. Come back to Boston, and we can put this unfortunate incident behind us." "I am willing to forgive this lapse in judgment." Cole felt anger rising in his chest, but Eliza spoke before he could. "It is not a lapse in judgment, and there is nothing to forgive. I don't love you, Richard. I never did, not really. I tried to convince myself I could be content with the life you were offering, but I can't. I won't. I deserve more than contentment, and so do you. You deserve someone who loves you with their whole heart, not someone settling for what is expected. So you are choosing poverty and obscurity over everything we could have had." Richard's voice was rising now, drawing looks from the other diners. "I am choosing happiness," Eliza said firmly. "I am choosing a life where I matter, where I can make a real difference. I am choosing love. Real love, not the pale imitation we had. And what about your family, your mother? I will write to her. I will try to make her understand, but I am not coming back, Richard. I am truly sorry for hurting you, but this is my life and this is my choice." Richard stared at her for a long moment, and Cole saw the exact moment he accepted defeat. His shoulders slumped slightly and the anger drained from his face, leaving behind something sadder. "I hope you know what you are doing, Eliza. I hope he is worth it." "He is," Eliza said softly. "And I hope you find someone who is worth it to you too, someone who looks at you the way I look at Cole. You deserve that." Richard nodded stiffly, then turned and walked out of the restaurant. They watched him go, and Cole put his arm around Eliza's shoulders. She was shaking. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes, it was hard but necessary. He needed to see that I was serious, that I had truly moved on. Maybe now he can move on too." She leaned into Cole's embrace. "Take me home, always." As summer deepened, life settled into a rhythm that felt right to both of them. Cole continued working at the ranch, saving every penny he could toward buying his own land. Eliza thrived as a teacher, discovering a talent for helping children learn that surprised and delighted her. The town fully accepted her now, and she became a valued member of the community. Mrs. Fletcher treated her like a daughter. Miss Hartley became a dear friend, and even the roughest cowboys tipped their hats respectfully when she passed. But the most important part of Eliza's new life was Cole. They courted properly, with Sunday dinners at Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house and walks through town where everyone could see them. But they also had moments of stolen privacy, rides out to the ridge where Cole had watched sunsets and written about wishing she was there, quiet conversations in the schoolhouse after hours, kisses that left them both breathless and wanting more. In August, Cole rode out to a piece of land he had been eyeing for months. It was 160 acres of prime grazing land with a creek running through it, backed up against the mountains. The owner was an old rancher named Davy who wanted to retire and move to California to be near his daughter. The price was fair, and with the money Cole had saved over the years plus a small loan from the bank, he could just barely afford it. He made the deal and rode back to town with the deed in his pocket and his heart in his throat. He found Eliza at the schoolhouse, grading papers while the late afternoon sun streamed through the windows. "Come with me," he said. "I need to show you something." She looked up, saw the expression on his face, and immediately set down her pen. "Is everything all right? Everything is perfect. Trust me, always." He helped her up onto his horse, and they rode out to the land that was now his. When they reached the spot where he envisioned building a house, he helped her down and they stood together, looking out at the view. "It is beautiful," Eliza breathed. "Who owns it?" "I do. As of about 3 hours ago." He pulled out the deed and showed her. 160 acres. Enough to run a decent herd of cattle with room to expand. There is good water from the creek, shelter from the mountains, and that spot right there is where I want to build our house. Our house. Her voice was trembling. Cole turned to her and took both her hands in his. "Eliza Montgomery, I know we have only been courting a few months, but I feel like I have known you for years through those letters. You are the bravest, most incredible woman I have ever met. You gave up everything to take a chance on something real on us. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Eliza's face, but she was smiling so wide it looked like her face might split in half. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched her eyes. It had cost him a week's wages, but the look on her face when he slipped it onto her finger was worth a year's salary. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect. This is all perfect." They were married in September in the small church in Silver Creek with the whole town in attendance. Miss Hartley stood up as Eliza's attendant, and Tommy served as Cole's best man. Mrs. Fletcher cried through the entire ceremony, and even some of the toughest cowboys had to wipe their eyes when Cole and Eliza exchanged vows. "I promise to love you through every season," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "Through the hard winters and the brief summers, through the struggles and the joys. I promise to be your partner in building a life that matters. I promise to see you, truly see you, every single day, the way I saw you in that general store a year and a half ago. I promise to be brave enough to keep choosing this life, choosing you every single day," Eliza said, tears running down her cheeks. "I promise to be your partner in every sense, to work beside you, to dream beside you, to love you with everything I have. You showed me what real love looks like through 52 letters, and I promise to show you every day for the rest of our lives that I was worth the wait." The reception was held at the boarding house, with food and music and dancing that lasted late into the night. When they finally left for the small cabin that would be their home until they could build the house on their new land, the entire town cheered and threw rice. That first night as husband and wife, lying together in the narrow bed, Eliza ran her fingers through Cole's hair and smiled. "Do you ever regret those 52 letters, all that time writing to someone who never wrote back?" "Not for 1 second, Cole said, pulling her closer. "Every word was worth it. It led to this, to you, to us. I would write 1,000 letters if it meant ending up here. You won't have to. I am not going anywhere." They spent the fall and winter planning the house they would build come spring. Eliza continued teaching, and Cole worked both at the ranch and on their own land, building fences and shelters for the small herd of cattle he purchased. They saved every penny, living simply but happily in the small cabin. On Sunday evenings, Cole would sit at the table and write, but now instead of letters to Eliza, he kept a journal documenting their life together, their plans and dreams and daily joys. Winter in Montana was harsh, but they weathered it together, keeping each other warm through the long, cold nights. Eliza learned to cook on the wood stove, producing meals that got better each week. Cole taught her to ride properly, and by spring, she could handle a horse almost as well as he could. They were partners in every sense, building their life together piece by piece. When the snows melted and the ground thawed, they began building their house. The whole town turned out to help, a barn-raising style effort that had the frame up in just 2 days. Over the following weeks, they finished the walls, the roof, the windows and doors. It was not a mansion, but it was solid and well-built, with 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a front porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. They moved in on a warm day in May, exactly 2 years after Cole wrote his first letter to Eliza. As they stood on that front porch, looking out at their land, their cattle grazing in the distance, the mountains standing sentinel behind them, Cole wrapped his arms around his wife and felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Eliza said. "Sometimes I wake up and think maybe I dreamed all of this, that I am still in Boston preparing to marry Richard and live that empty life. But then I reach over and you are there, solid and real, and I remember that this is my life now. This beautiful, hard, real life." That summer, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with a mixture of joy and terror. The nearest doctor was in Helena, a full day's ride away, and childbirth on the frontier was dangerous. But Mrs. Fletcher had helped deliver dozens of babies over the years, and she assured them that Eliza was strong and healthy. "You will be fine, dear," the older woman said, patting Eliza's hand. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time. Your body knows what to do." As Eliza's belly grew through the fall and winter, Cole became increasingly protective. He worried constantly, checking on her multiple times a day, insisting she stop teaching when she got too big, hovering whenever she did anything more strenuous than sitting down. Eliza found it both touching and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one evening when he practically carried her from the barn back to the house after she helped feed the horses. "Women have been doing hard work while pregnant for all of human history." "I know, but you are my wife and that is my child, and I will not take any chances with either of you," Cole said stubbornly. "I love you for caring so much, but you need to trust that I know my own limits." She took his hand and placed it on her swollen belly, and right at that moment the baby kicked hard. Cole's eyes went wide with wonder. "Did you feel that?" he breathed. "I feel it all the time. The baby is very active. I think we are going to have our hands full." The baby came on a cold February night in 1885. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Cole paced the kitchen while Mrs. Fletcher and Miss Hartley tended to Eliza in the bedroom. Every cry of pain from his wife felt like a knife to his heart. He had faced down wild horses and angry cattle, had weathered blizzards and droughts, but nothing had ever scared him like this. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard a new sound. The thin, angry cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Fletcher emerged from the bedroom, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Cole, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is exhausted but fine." Cole rushed into the bedroom and found Eliza propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Cole, meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the small red face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused dark eyes. Cole felt something shift in his chest, an expansion of love so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," Cole whispered. "You are perfect. I love you so much." "I love you too." Eliza held out the baby toward him. "Hold your son." Cole took the baby carefully, terrified he might break something, but the moment he settled the small weight against his chest, it felt natural. The baby made a small sound and seemed to nestle in closer, and Cole felt tears running down his own face. They named him James, after Cole's father, with the middle name of Thomas after Eliza's grandfather, who had been the only member of her family besides her aunt to approve of her choice to come west. Young James was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them up most nights but filled their days with wonder. Watching Eliza with their son made Cole fall in love with her all over again. She was a natural mother, patient and tender, singing to James in a sweet voice that made even the baby settle down and listen. But she was also fierce in protecting him, and more than once Cole saw hints of the courage that had brought her across the country to take a chance on love. 6 months after James was born, Eliza received a letter from Boston. It was from her mother, the first communication from her family since she had left. Cole watched anxiously as she opened it, afraid of what it might contain. Eliza read in silence, her expression unchanging, and then she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "My mother wants to meet her grandson. She says she has come to understand why I made the choices I did, that she was wrong to try to force me into a life I did not want. She is asking if she can visit." "What do you want to do?" Cole asked carefully. "I want her to come. I want her to see this life we have built, to meet you and James, to understand that I am happy. Do you mind?" "Of course not. She is your mother. This is your home, and you can invite anyone you want." Eliza's mother, Catherine Montgomery, arrived in August. She was a formidable woman in her 60s, dressed in Eastern fashions that looked absurdly out of place in Silver Creek. Cole was prepared to dislike her, or for her to dislike him, but within an hour of her arrival, he saw where Eliza got her strength. Catherine looked around their home with sharp, assessing eyes, walked the property with them, met the townspeople, and watched Eliza teaching at the school and caring for James. At dinner that first night, she finally spoke her mind. "I owe you both an apology," she said. "Especially you, Eliza. I tried to force you into a mold that did not fit because it was what I knew, what I thought was safe and right. I was angry when you left, mortified by the scandal. But over these past 2 years, I have had time to think. I was living through you, trying to make you have the life I had, the life I thought was the only acceptable option. But watching you now, seeing how happy you are, how fulfilled, I realize I was wrong." Eliza reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just needed to be true to myself." "You were braver than I ever was," Catherine said, her voice thick. "And you," she turned to Cole, "you are not what I expected. I thought you would be some rough, uneducated fortune hunter, but you are a good man. I can see it in the way you look at my daughter, the way you care for your son, the way the people in this town respect you. You make her happy, and that is all a mother can truly ask for." Catherine stayed for 3 weeks, and by the time she left, she had formed a genuine bond with Cole and an even deeper one with her grandson. She promised to visit every year and to send letters regularly. The reconciliation healed something in Eliza that Cole had not even realized was hurting. The years that followed were full and rich. Their ranch prospered, growing from a small operation to one of the most successful in the region. Cole's reputation as an honest rancher spread, and he was eventually elected to the town council. Eliza continued teaching, shaping the minds of Silver Creek's children and earning the love and respect of multiple generations. James grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and the mountains. When he was 3, Eliza gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, after her mother, with the middle name of Grace. 2 years after that, another son arrived, whom they named Samuel. Their house rang with the sounds of children playing, of laughter and occasional tears, of life being lived fully. On quiet evenings, after the children were in bed, Cole and Eliza would sit on their porch and watch the sunset, just as Cole had described in those early letters. Sometimes they talked about the day's events, the challenges and triumphs of running a ranch and raising a family. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, content just to be together. "Do you ever regret leaving Boston?" Cole asked one evening when Eliza was especially quiet. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. My only regret is that I wasted a year of my life afraid to take the chance, afraid to write back to you. If I could do it over, I would have replied to your first letter, would have saved us both that year of uncertainty." "But would it mean as much if it had been easy?" Cole mused. Those 52 letters, they forced me to really think about what I wanted, to put my feelings into words, to commit to pursuing you even when it seemed hopeless. And you breaking off your engagement, coming all this way not knowing what you would find, that took incredible courage. Maybe we needed that time to become the people who were ready for this kind of love. Eliza smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. When did you become so wise? I married a teacher. Some of it was bound to rub off. As their children grew older, Cole and Eliza made sure to tell them the story of how they met, of the 52 letters, of the leap of faith Eliza took in coming west. They wanted their children to understand that love was worth fighting for, that courage could change your life, that following your heart was not always easy, but it was always worthwhile. James, as the eldest, was especially fascinated by the story. When he was 10, he asked to see the letters. Cole had kept every single one, tied with a ribbon and stored in a wooden box. They sat together, father and son, as Cole read passages aloud, his voice sometimes cracking with emotion at the memories. "You really loved Mama even before she came here?" James asked. "I did. I saw something special in her from the very first moment. But love is not just a feeling, son. It is a choice you make every day. I chose to write those letters, to keep hoping even when I heard nothing back. Your mother chose to break her engagement and come west, knowing she might find that I was not the man she thought I was. And every day since, we have both chosen to keep loving each other through the hard times and the good times. I want a love like that someday," James said seriously. "You will, if you are patient and brave and true to yourself. Love finds you when you are ready for it." The children thrived in the Montana Territory, growing strong and capable. James showed an aptitude for ranching and by his teenage years was Cole's right hand in running the operation. Catherine, called Kate by the family, inherited her mother's love of learning and her father's way with words. Samuel was the adventurous one, always exploring, always pushing boundaries, keeping his parents constantly on their toes. When James was 18, the same age Cole had been when he lost his parents, he told his father he wanted to start his own spread, to build something of his own the way Cole had. Instead of being threatened, Cole was proud. He helped his son find land, co-signed the loan, and spent every spare moment helping James build his first house and barn. "You are giving him so much help," Eliza observed, watching father and son work together. "Are you not worried he won't appreciate it if it comes too easily?" "I am giving him the help I wish I had when I was his age," Cole said. "I want him to succeed. His success is my success. Besides, he is working just as hard as I did. I am just making sure he does not have to do it alone." Kate eventually went to college, one of the first women from Silver Creek to do so, studying literature and education. She returned home with plans to expand the school to bring better education to the growing town. Samuel traveled for several years before settling down, working as a guide for wealthy Easterners who wanted to hunt and explore the West. Through it all, Cole and Eliza remained the steady center, their love the foundation on which their entire family was built. They celebrated holidays together, weathered illnesses and accidents, mourned losses, and rejoiced in triumphs. The ranch continued to prosper, providing not just for their immediate family but employment for dozens of men over the years. When Cole turned 50, the whole town threw a celebration. He stood in the middle of the community center, surrounded by friends and family, overwhelmed by the outpouring of affection. When it came time to make a speech, he pulled Eliza to his side and addressed the crowd. 30 years ago, I was a lonely cowboy who took a chance on writing a letter to a woman I barely knew. I wrote 52 letters with no response, and every one of my friends told me I was crazy. But I kept writing because I believed in possibility, in hope, in the chance that something incredible could happen if I just had enough courage to reach for it. And then one day, the most amazing woman in the world showed up at my door, and my entire life changed. Everything good in my life stems from that moment, from the courage we both showed in taking a chance on love. So thank you, Eliza, for being brave enough to leave everything behind and build something new with me. And thank you to all of you for welcoming us, for supporting us, for being part of our story. There was not a dry eye in the building when he finished, and Eliza kissed him right there in front of everyone, not caring who saw, not caring about propriety, just loving him with everything she had. As they moved into their later years, Cole and Eliza slowed down but never stopped. They handed over more of the ranch operations to James and his growing family, but they still rode out to check on the cattle, still sat on their porch every evening, still held hands like newlyweds. They became the honored elders of Silver Creek, the couple everyone pointed to as an example of what love should look like. Grandchildren arrived, 7 in total, filling their house with noise and chaos and indescribable joy. Cole taught them all to ride, to work with cattle, to appreciate the beauty of the Montana landscape. Eliza read to them, told them stories, taught them their letters and numbers. Together, they passed on the values that had guided their lives: courage, honesty, hard work, and above all, love. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren organized a celebration at the ranch. There was food and music and dancing under the stars. At one point, Cole pulled Eliza away from the crowd and led her to their spot on the ridge, where he had once watched sunsets and written letters wishing she was there. They stood together, his arms around her, looking out at the land they had built a life on, the mountains standing eternal in the distance, the stars emerging in the darkening sky. 30 years, Eliza said softly. Sometimes it feels like just yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever. But every single day has been a gift. I would do it all again, Cole said. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it led to this, to us, to the life we have built together. You made me believe in love, real love, the kind that lasts. You made me believe in myself, Eliza replied. You saw me, truly saw me when no one else did. You gave me the courage to choose my own path, and you have been my partner every step of the way. They kissed as the stars emerged fully overhead, the same stars that had watched over them through decades of life together, and would continue to watch over their children and grandchildren for generations to come. As they walked back to the celebration, hand in hand, they could hear the music and laughter drifting up from the house. Their house, their family, their legacy. All because a lonely cowboy had written a letter to a woman he barely knew, and she had been brave enough to respond not with words, but with her whole life. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the inevitable changes of time. Cole's hair turned completely white and his hands, once so strong, developed a slight tremor. Eliza moved slower, her joints protesting the hard life she had lived, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit undiminished. They supported each other through every challenge, just as they always had. When Cole was 68, he fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For weeks, he battled the infection, and there were days when Eliza thought she might lose him. She sat by his bedside, holding his hand, telling him he could not leave her yet. They still had more sunsets to watch together. And he fought, drawing on reserves of strength neither of them knew he still possessed, until finally the fever broke and he began to recover. You scared me, Eliza told him when he was finally well enough to sit up and eat solid food. I am sorry, but I heard you, when I was in the fever. I heard you telling me to fight, to stay with you. I could not leave you, not after everything we have been through together. They knew then that their time together, while precious, was also finite. So they made the most of every day. They took slow rides around their land, revisited all their special places, spent long hours with their children and grandchildren, making sure everyone knew how much they were loved. On a warm evening in late summer, when Cole was 73 and Eliza 71, they sat together on their porch as the sun set in a blaze of gold and crimson. The entire family had gathered that day for a barbecue, and the sounds of children playing drifted from the yard. This is what heaven must be like, Cole said softly. surrounded by the people you love in a place you helped build, watching the sun set over the mountains. If heaven is better than this, I cannot imagine what it must be like, Eliza agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting perfectly into the space she had occupied for nearly 5 decades. Do you remember that day I showed up at your cabin, how terrified I was that I had made a terrible mistake? I remember thinking I must be dreaming, that you could not possibly be real. Best decision I ever made coming here. Best decision you ever made writing those letters. 52 letters that changed everything. 52 letters that brought us here to this moment, to this life. Not a bad return on investment. Cole laughed, the sound warm and familiar, and kissed the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared, and the stars began to emerge one by one, eternal witnesses to a love story that had started with ink and paper and faith, and had grown into something beautiful and enduring, a legacy that would outlast them both, living on in their children and grandchildren and the generations yet to come. The cowboy and the Boston lady who had taken the greatest risk of her life for love, together until the end, exactly as they had promised each other so many years ago in a small church in Silver Creek, Montana Territory. Their story was proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach for what seems impossible, write the letters, take the journey, show up in person, and trust that love will find a way, and it always did.